Welcome everybody to another webinar hosted by Baselane, and we're super excited to be hosting Colin. I'll do a brief intro for Colin. I'll let him say hello, and then we'll get into the program. So Colin Carvey is the co-founder of Revedy, which I'm super excited to talk about today. Revedy is the market leader in underwriting short-term rentals as an investment asset, and we're going to talk all about what that means today. He's established Revedy's proprietary underwriting platform so investors can predict the true yields, occupancy, and the ADR at the asset level. And that's going to be the kind of the heart of the discussion today. Colin is a veteran of the vacation rental industry and prop tech, having led Vacasa to their $319 million Series C as their head of growth, which is an amazing achievement for anybody who's in startup land. And he was responsible for 88 mergers and acquisitions, produced over 3 times growth, increased overall unit profitability, and built a team that continues to serve Vacasa to this day. He's got 20 years of financial services experience. So we definitely have the right person in the room with us if we're talking about short-term rentals and, finding the property, knowing what property to go after and why. What are the numbers? What metrics should we be looking at? And what data do we use, which is the most important thing, to make those decisions? So that's super exciting. Colin, welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Saad. Super excited to be here. I think there's a lot to cover in a short period of time, but I'm glad we're here. And, we love what you guys are doing at Baselane as well. I think it's really specific to the assets, and I think that's really important from what we're doing as well.
Absolutely. So for those that are just kind of wondering what we're going to be talking about, so we labeled the name of the webinar, The Myth of Location. So what drives short-term rental returns? Is it location or is it the asset? Or is it the asset or is it the location? Which one is it? Or is it both? And so that's what we're going to really dig into today. I'm super excited about this because Baselane is able to help everybody, on the financial management side and the property management side of things with our banking, our bookkeeping, our cash flow analytics, so you can understand your expenses and all your data, our online rent collection if you're doing direct bookings or MTR, our tax reporting, and all the other features that we have under property management. In addition to that, we're excited to partner with Revedy because Revedy is going to help you grow. It's gonna help you find those deals, educate yourself, and understand how to analyze those deals, but also most importantly with the right data, which is, I think, critical. And a lot of the, what I would say, smaller investors do not usually have access to. So that's what I'm most excited about is you no longer just have to go on Zillow or just kind of Google it and go on Airbnb and try to figure out what the nightly rates are going to be. You can use real data to do this. So that's really the introduction to the program. And I want to just do a couple of quick housekeeping things, and then we're going to get started. So this is being recorded, and we will be posting the video on our YouTube channel, on Baselane's YouTube channel. So for anybody that is unfamiliar with that, I'll send that in the chat one more time. You can subscribe to that to get the recording. We are going to launch a poll, and this will really help just me and Colin to be able to, just have a good discussion with you. And if I can find it, I'll launch it. There we go. No, there we go. So there are 5 questions in the poll. So if you can please go ahead and do that, I think that will really help us tailor the discussion. And I'm going to just set this up the right way as well here. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so go ahead and answer the question in the poll. And then Colin, while that's happening, I think we can get started. So I think, a lot of people come to us and ask, where should I invest? Right? Like, hey, I want to do short-term rentals. I want to do midterm rentals. Is Florida really still good? Is Indiana really still good? And, we had a chat about this on Tuesday. How do you think about that? And, how does Revedy relate to that? Like, can you tell me a little bit about the background of Revedy as well before we jump into that question?
Yeah. So, and it's good to know that too, because I think it's kind of guided us through this process. So Revedy, I founded it really trying to bring in and help folks understand that short-term rentals were an asset class that you can invest in. Historically, it has not been viewed as that. It's been second homes, and I'm going to Airbnb, maybe my bedroom, right? Or my extra space, or I'm gone for 2 weeks, I'm going to rent that out. And folks haven't really viewed it as this investment that they can invest in and get returns on, and specifically purchase it for that reason. So we started Revedy with that in mind, and really trying to bring in more, I'll call it institutional capital or large investors into the space, because we truly believe that it's a hospitality asset. You've got real estate and you have hospitality. That is
Right.
actually a really good mix. And the interesting thing is as you get into single family homes, right, the exits are better than you can get with hotels, for example, from the standpoint of the multiple ways you can do it. So this asset is better than investing in hotels, we would suggest. And
Yeah.
then you go on the other side of that and you go to long-term rent, single family homes, right, where again, you're limited, cash flows limited, et cetera. And we really do believe that short-term rentals are a great real estate investment. You get the benefits of hospitality and you get the benefits of the real estate asset. And so you get both those things coming together. So we went
Right.
about trying to build that out and saying, how do we try and get this into a place that people can get comfortable with that? And the first thing we did was really look at the data and spend a bunch of time understanding the data sources that were available, understanding where the weaknesses and the gaps were within that data, and then built the data internally. Now, some of that is purchase data. So we acquire data from multiple sources. We do
Okay.
what we call right side it, i.e., make sure we look at it from a certain lens. Again,
Right.
I don't care about grandma's apartment that she's renting out once a week. That's not an
Right.
investment.
Right.
So really trying to look at these assets as investment assets and trying to screen for that and make sure we build that in. And so our data, is set around that. We do that in three ways. We have what we call scrape data. So that's data directly from Airbnb, VRBO, et cetera. You have actual data. So that's actual
Mm.
performance of assets, which we could get into a long discussion someday about why
Yeah.
that's not truth and everybody thinks it is, but management matters so much that actuals isn't necessarily truth. It gives you
Right.
guardrails, but it's not truth.
Right. Right.
And then last but not least is closer to the truth, which is Revedy's underwrite. So where we've actually looked at the asset, say this is what we forecast it to do. And we've done about $55 billion. I think my team would tell me it's $60 billion now. So a
Wow.
lot. We've looked at a
Okay.
lot, and that's all specific to the US because we
Got it.
focus uniquely on the US.
That's super helpful. So you have all of this data. Now, going back to the question, because we even did a webinar with another influencer investor up in Indiana and the Michigan area, and he was very confident, and it made sense for him to be in that area. But this is something that commonly comes up all the time. Sort of the key question is like, where should I invest? And what is your answer to that if everybody here is asking that question?
So I get asked that question constantly
I'm sure you
by
do. Yeah.
even our
Yeah.
institutional investors or family offices that are investing, $30 million into this space.
Right.
And it's always the same answer I give. It depends. And it depends on you, each individual. Trying to broadcast a, comprehensive list of here's the places you should invest. You're going to see people either use averages, which I'll show some slides in a bit on why averages is not a great thing to make decisions off of,
Hmm.
especially in the investment community. Um, and then or they're looking at it from a very broad sense of if you include this or that, or you're looking at it from just regulations, or you're looking at it just from revenue, or you're looking at there's all these complications and pieces when you're thinking about quote unquote what market to enter. My answer always to them is don't look at the market, look at the asset type you want. The first
Mm.
thing you need to do is understand what your thesis is and what you want to acquire. What do you believe is going to produce revenue based on your research and data? And to me,
Yeah, I love that.
you get
Yeah, I
that.
want to I
Go
want to
ahead.
pause
I'll
that one.
keep
Sorry,
going. So you better
because
pause me, Saad.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
want to pause because I want to make sure
Yeah.
we get this, like we
Yeah.
all understand it.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I like and I want to acknowledge that I feel better now that you're saying institutional investors also ask this question.
Yes.
I don't
Me too.
feel as not smart anymore. I think that's important. And I think you said bad averages are not good. Don't look at an average extrapolation.
Yep.
Don't be too broad and don't just look at one thing like a metric like revenue or regulations that are favorable to you, unlike New York, or for example. Look at it holistically. But you said asset type and you're saying the thesis. So what does it mean? What do you mean by the thesis? Is that the, hey, Saad, why do you want to invest in short-term rentals in the first place? Or is that something else?
No, it's a little. I think that is important. So and really, it's why you want to
Hmm.
invest in it and what do you believe in, right? So let's start with the why because I think that's important to get a hold of. If
Yep.
you're investing in it because you want to use it, it's a great asset because you can make money off it and you can use it. And some people are like, yeah, I just want it to cash flow and then I want to be able to take my family there. That's great.
Right.
That's a different equation and that's a different thing that you got to go through because you've got to understand, okay, if you're going to use it, then you have to buy in certain markets that you like because otherwise you're
Yep.
not going to use it. If it's a place you don't want to go, you're not going to use it.
Yep.
Um, oh, and by the way, Saad, on that point, I would also recommend that if you're an individual investor, you check with your wife or your spouse, whoever that might be, because
Yeah.
we've been in this situation many a time where the investor wanted to invest and the spouse wanted a place to go stay. So
Right. Right.
and so it's really knowing the intent of why and how you're going to use it. If it is a straight investment, right? So now you're thinking about it as an investment, then you've got to ask yourself, okay, what do I believe is going to happen in this short-term rental space?
Mm.
And there's a few things, and I can actually bring up a slide real quick
Yeah,
that
let's do it.
that will
Yeah.
show you kind of the things that we think about when we're talking to some of our clients about what they should think about in markets. And what you're going to hear me talk about is in each item, each one of these items, you can go on either side of it. And it really
Right.
depends on your risk profile and what you believe and how many bets you want to make. So let's start with one of the things you should consider. You mentioned it, regulations, right? So what are the rules around short-term rentals? There are
Right.
some markets that are really strict on the rules. And people are like, oh, I don't want to operate there. And I'll tell you, maybe you should. The supply is
Right.
restrained because of regulations. If you can find an
Mm.
asset that you can then manage in that market, you're going to have low supply and high demand. Basic economics,
Right.
you're going to
Right.
make returns on that asset. Now, that can be harder just because of the things you got to go through. You might want something similar. I mean, it's simpler, right? And so you may go to
Right.
a market that doesn't have regulations or allows them. You still got to be careful against your risk profile because you might want to go into a very established vacation rental market that has regulations that have been around or no regulations, and then you don't have to worry about them because they're going to be there. But what happens in those markets is you're going to see price pressure on the house prices
Too much
because they're going to
supply.
be
Yeah.
oriented towards the fact that they can be rented out. If you're more on the risk side of, hey, I'm risky, I want to go make some bets, you might want to go into a market where the regulations have been changing because more people have exited, you're going to have greater supply. And if the rules don't change, you might have a really good asset, right? That you can make a lot of returns on because, again, supply is low and demand is high. So
Yeah.
even on the regulations question, it's a risk profile question of what you believe in and what kind of risk you want to take.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. This reminds me of the conversation you have with your financial advisor or retirement planner, right? Like, number one thing they ask you is, what is your goal, right? For example, like, when do you want to retire? How much do you think you're going to need, right?
Yep.
And then the second question they ask you is, what is your risk level or your risk appetite? And so I really love the professionalism aspect of this part, which is like thinking about this as a business and as an investment vehicle and assessing the risk. What are sort of the other key metrics? So you mentioned we should think about the asset, right? What are the other key metrics that we should be thinking about and considering when we try to identify the asset type that we want to invest in?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, right, is really understanding the price point at which you can purchase, right? Like that's a
Okay.
huge component of it. It's the first thing we do with our clients is how much do you want to spend? And even with our family offices, they'll have restrictions on how high they go. They may have $30 million, but they don't want to go beyond $1.5 million asset
Yeah.
because of their risk profile of how much risk they're willing to take with one individual asset. It's the same as an individual, right? Who's looking at the asset of like, how much am I willing to spend within one market, within one asset? Um,
Right.
you'll hear us talk at Revedy. We really like to give folks a little insight into what we like to purchase is the houses that are, I'll call it 700,000 to about 1.5. It can vary by markets, but that gives you an example of kind of the price range that, again, I'm going to talk about averages, but on average gives you
Right.
pretty good returns in most markets because they're higher end. They generate a lot of what we call ADR, annual
Right.
daily rent. So, and that leads to the next thing, which is ADR is important. A lot of people look at it and use it. A lot of people don't know what it is, and a lot of people overemphasize it. But it is a good metric to give you an idea of kind of where things land.
I see. So I want to recap this to make sure we're downloading the information. So purchase price, like how much can you afford? Number one.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that is also tied to the loan type you're going to get, the percent down that you're required to do. What type of loan are you getting? Are you getting like a vacation rental loan for your secondary home? Are you getting a DSCR loan and so on? Um, as well as what else you have going on, right? Like you said, the family
Mhm.
office, they might have the 20 million, they might have a million, but that doesn't mean they want to deploy all of that capital. So
That's
that's a
right.
super important. Okay. And
Yep.
by the way, yeah, we also just recently launched a partner that offers STR loans. That 95% of their volume is STR, and they underwrite. I personally use them, so go check them out on our rental loan page. Sorry, I'm a little sick, so my throat's getting a little messed up. So moving on from this, I know we had talked about, like looking at an example because I always like to see, let's make this real and tangible and see, what does the process look like? So maybe we can do that. And Colin, before we go there, I just want to clarify again to make sure everybody understands. You were talking about working with investors. So Revedy, as a company, what are the products and services that it offers to investors? I know we
Yeah.
talked about data, but maybe just a high level overview of that again.
Yes. So we provide actually an end-to-end solution for folks who are looking at this. So very high touch service for these folks. So if you want to come in and understand where to go, we'll help you decide that. We provide services that give you listings, so actual assets or homes that have been already underwritten, so you can understand what those would make. And then we provide all the way through, including acquisition services to help you actually buy it. So if you need an agent, we can do that for you, either through our own brokerage or through partner brokerages. We have design services because this asset's very unique from a design perspective and very important is the design. And then we'll help you if you want to find a manager, we'll help you find that manager. So really from beginning of I'm just looking and I need tools to help me do that. We have tools you can self-service on that help you understand what the market is and those kind of things. If you're looking to go to the next level of like, hey, I really want to start looking and searching, we have services where someone will help you through that process and will take you all the way through to actually managing the home, which is an important piece
That's
of it.
great. And one thing I want to highlight is that you can go and find Revedy, log into Baseline, go to the partner section, and I'll show that later on. And just click there, and we've got a special page dedicated to the Baseline customers, so you can go and check that out. Yeah, so maybe Colin, if you don't mind, we can look at, you mentioned the averages thing, you mentioned some of these metrics. Why are those things bad? And then what should we be looking at, and maybe like an example as we had discussed.
Yeah, I'll pull this up really quick and we'll go fast on this part. But
Yeah.
this is just an example of why averages and using some of the data that is readily available out there can be misleading or at least guide you in maybe not the direction you really want to go. So if you look at this city one and city two, there's two example cities. I think one's in Tennessee and the other one's in Arizona, but you get the point. And if you look at this, you can see that the average is very close to being the same, right? Very
Mm,
close on average. So if you just use averages to decide, you would be like, well, I'm going to pick both cities or I'm going to pick the orange city, right? Because it's a little higher on average. But if you look at
right.
this, if you look over on the left-hand side, you can see this high, right? that's the higher revenue and higher returns that you're getting is on those ones that sit higher in that spectrum, and especially in the short-term rental space, because the asset matters so much more. Everybody talks about location, location, location with real estate. A short-term rental asset isn't just about location. It's also about the unit itself. It's about how it's decorated. It's really about how it appears to a consumer online who's going to go stay at that home. What does the guest feel when they see that home and when they
Right.
stay in that home? And
Right.
so you can have extreme variances with houses that are right next to each other just because of how they're photographed, how they were designed, what the reviews look like when a client stayed there. And so really understanding the threshold of a market is super important, because if I was an investor, I want to be the home that's on that high point, not
Right.
the one that's on the average point. I'm an investor.
So
It's all about
Colin,
the returns.
I'm going to ask you the basic question. How do I now? So
Mhm.
public data is only averages, right? So how how do I actually look at this and get data? And obviously, I think you guys have that data. Like, how do we actually use that data as well, right? So what is the data that we should be looking at? And then how do we actually use that data?
Yeah, so I'm going to do this a little bit backwards, and
Sure.
I'm going to share an underwrite. So this is what we provide to our clients. I can then show you kind of how we go through that process to get to that underwrite. But
Sure.
I think it's more important to show folks, kind of what we look at and the measurements at which we utilize to assess these assets. Um, so we have tools, and these tools are available to Base Lane clients as well. And we built these first internally, then our family office, large investors wanted to use it. So we allowed them to use it. And then we really wanted to democratize it. So we've now made these available to everybody. But here
Mm.
you go. Here is what we would call our underwrite. So you can see this is a certified underwrite. And a certified underwrite means that one of our analysts has actually reviewed it. So we've actually looked at this asset and helped understand what the rent would be using our various sources. It's got all the key elements you would expect: square feet, beds, baths, all those things. Those are utilized as we look at this. An important element of this you'll see us talk about is sleeps.
Mm.
Sleeps matters more than bedrooms within short-term rentals, because that's what people search for when they're looking online. So the good thing about that is you can have a house that maybe has fewer bedrooms in some markets, but you can't count it a room as a bedroom because it doesn't have a closet based on the
Right.
rules.
Right.
It
So just to
still
be clear,
qualifies.
this is a real property
It's a
that
real property.
okay, got it.
Yep, real property. You can see the home value, which is the price at which it's at, is $600,000. You can see that our projected income here is $105,000 annually. So that's what we would call top line. The cap rate's calculated using expense metrics we utilize, and that's based on market and management fees. All our expense defaults to somebody else managing it. So meaning you don't
Okay.
have to do anything. You buy in the house, you hand the keys to a manager, and they manage it. You can change that setting to be what you want it to be.
Right.
You can
And
do it at 0% if you're going to manage it yourself. But yeah.
and how much do you bake into that on average as a percentage for management
Yeah,
fees?
on average, it's about 25% in
Okay.
most markets. When you
Okay.
get into the ski markets, that can go up to as high as 45%. So because of snow
Okay. Wow.
removal and. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
average, we use 25% for most markets. So, you can see the cash returns pretty darn good. Um, yeah, and then your average daily rate, which I talked about, and occupancy, another important thing within the short-term rental space. Um, I'm going to scroll through this really fast. We have things in here that's showing you like net operating income by month. An important thing, if you've never looked at short-term rentals, sometimes they can go negative in a month, even though in an annualized way they're positive.
Right. And just to be on that, how do you get that data? So that monthly breakdown, is that an extrapolation? Is that based on real data that you're seeing in that market?
Yes, so,
Or
so we have an algorithm based on our data that runs through
okay.
that. Part of what we'll do is on utilities, we're flatlining costs, and then we're using seasonality curves because higher seasons, you get higher usage, you get higher utility costs. So
I see.
we've got a really, actually really cool algorithm against that. That gives you a pretty darn good idea based on the rent and the expenses.
Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
this goes into mortgage. You can see that. There's also comp sets here that it provides. Again, this is real samples. We don't have always pictures of the comps, so you can see here, some of these don't have pictures. But you can actually adjust these if you're like, that's not really a comp because I know where this is and I don't think that's a comp. These you are able to edit and change these to give you a different view into what this would do. Um,
And these comps are actual short-term
yeah.
rental listings
These
that
are
are live.
actual
Okay.
listings. That is correct.
Okay.
And you either get a link to the listing. In some cases, you can click on it and it will actually take you to the Airbnb listing. Other times, it'll take you to a Zillow listing. Just depends on kind of what's available at that time.
Right. There's a question here about sleeps versus bedrooms. So, what's the major difference between number of people that it can sleep versus the bedrooms?
Yeah, yeah. So most markets will allow you to do regulated markets where you have regulations and a lot of the consistent vacation markets will say you can have the number of bedrooms plus two, i.e., you're sleeping in the living room. But there are some markets that don't even cap that. So you could have
Hmm.
a garage that you converted into a sleeping area that now you get to add additional sleeps. You can have bunk beds in the house that allow you to add additional sleeps for multiple kids, for example. And the difference there
Right.
again is that people are searching for sleeps. When I'm looking and traveling with two families, I'm not looking at bedrooms, I'm looking at how many can this sleep.
That's clear. Okay. Got it. So we've got what is this cost section here?
Yeah, so this is going to help you with design and staging. So this will give you estimates. If you were starting with a blank house, what would it cost you to furnish it, including all the way down to the silverware? We have a design firm in house that you can utilize that can give you a more accurate estimate. But this gives you the quick ballpark, which is an important factor when you're looking at buying a short-term rental.
Right.
This is local amenities. It's just important to understand where you're located because local amenities can have a big pull to short-term rentals and guests. So it's good to understand what's around, including even coffee shops, believe it or not, can increase your revenue. Um, this is key features. I'm not going to go into the details on this. Is just the basics of the
Yeah.
house. This is property management. So this is looking at performance of a manager in that market and gives you some data points on how much, what their annual revenue is on average, their occupancy, how many they manage in the region. And it can give you a good idea of who you want to manage the home. If you use us as your advisor, we'll actually help you through this process in a bit more depth because it does, again, matter depending on the asset that you pick, who you should use. Um, and then, definitely not least, is the market analysis, which shows you the average for the market, again, using our data. But this gives you, kind of the revenue curves, occupancy curves, and a little bit more data on, how many bedrooms there are compared to the revenue. So good, insightful information to give you an overview of the market. Um,
Right.
but you should beat this if you're an investor. You want to beat the averages. And last but not least, a very thorough regulatory review, including what we call a risk score. So how risky are the regs and stable, and the opportunity score. Opportunity score is looking at like how easy and how much opportunity there is within that market based on the regulations. But you can see, I mean, I think the team's done an amazing
Yeah.
job on this. But I mean, it talks about the renewal fee. If there's a phone number, we don't have it on this one, but there'll be a phone number to call. You can see we actually have a link on here. You click on this little orange button, it says application. It takes you right to the application to fill out. So very robust around the regulations. It gives you a lot of details around what's
Right.
acceptable and not. So um,
Yeah,
this
that's
is
super helpful. Yeah, I really like seeing this example. So if you have this level of insight, we talked about picking the asset type first. So how do you guys like, what's the process to really figure out what which asset type that an investor should invest in, right? So if I'm telling you, hey, I want to generate $5,000 a month, is making up a number. And, this is my situation. I don't really know where to go. Um, what's the process like to go and figure out, okay, Saad, we think that these are the 4 or 5 options that you have, and you should think about which one makes, the most sense for you.
Yeah, so we did do the best way to do that is to start getting assets. And if you work with Revedy, we will walk you through that process and we will start sending you assets. So our
Okay.
advisors will talk to you and say, okay, where do you want to kind of focus? What's your goals? They'll help you kind of get an idea on markets. And then
Right.
we start sending you assets. And that's the most critical part. Some clients take years to figure out what they want to do. But
Right.
if you don't start getting these assets and seeing these underwrites, it's hard to really get a feel. A lot of people, again, start with these markets, right? And they're researching the markets. And always my recommendation is get the assets, look at it at the asset level first. It's going to give you a much better idea of what you care about.
Yeah.
We've worked with so many people over the years, and their idea of what they say they want
Right.
almost always changes once they start getting assets. Almost
Yeah.
always.
I want to clarify that and then ask one more question from one of the attendees. So, in terms of like, so you're basically sending examples of assets to pick from. So going back to that example, how would we know what is the I don't know if I missed it, like what's the ask price of that asset? How much cash do I need to, go all in to have it, purchased and set up, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's part of what we do in the underwriting, right? So when we start with you, we're going to talk to you about what you can afford to purchase. And
Right.
we have lenders, you have lenders on it, maybe even the same. Um,
Yeah.
and I think we partner with them first to understand what you qualify for, because that's going to give us a better idea of what you can actually buy.
Okay.
Prices that
So
what you purchasing power is the most critical decision, that critical
yes.
item we need first. How much can you actually afford? Because that's going to drive even what markets we recommend. Because some markets we're going to tell you, yeah, you just can't afford to buy there. Aspen,
Right.
Colorado, you've got to be in the $3 million range to get something that's worthwhile. Maybe 1.5 million if we stretch you into a condo that's ski in, ski out. You get
Right.
the point.
Right. Yeah. No, that super helpful. There's a question here. How would you say Revity differs from Price Labs and AirDNA? Is it that you have actual analysts working on the information provided by the client as opposed to only using web scraping and algorithms to provide data?
That's exactly right. So those tools, again, I'm not frowning on them. They can be helpful, but they are averages again, right? And that's scrape data only, right? You're looking at scrape data and averages. Price
Right.
Labs is using industry data. So they're using a lot of property manager data. But again, they're not screening for what we call investment grade. They're not looking at those assets of performance on the higher tier. They're showing you more of those averages. And it's not comprehensive. It doesn't include some of the self-managers that aren't reporting into that data. Our data is much
Right.
more robust than that. So.
Got it. That's super
And
helpful.
it's a service,
Yeah.
right? Again, it's a
Right.
service. It's not just you going there and clicking on buttons and trying to figure it out. With
Yeah.
us,
No,
you get a team, right?
yeah, what
You have a team behind you.
what I really like about this is, with the reality is everybody here probably has a day job and they're trying to invest on the side. And so deal analysis, I mean, finding deals is about reps, like volume, looking at the right number of them making offers. Can't really make an offer if you don't underwrite the deal. And I think the last mile problem there is if you're not able to underwrite it yourself. And when I saw this a few days ago, I got really, really excited because I was like, oh, you're telling me I don't have to send this to somebody on my team to go underwrite it because I don't trust them to do it the right way.
That's right.
And I don't have time to do the underwriting. You can do it for me. That's what really got me excited. I think that's very powerful because, again, you don't want to be sitting out on the sidelines. You want to be in the game, but you can't really do that unless you put the time in. So what you're showing is a full underwritten report by a professional, and you pretty much like hit every single aspect of it, all the way down to how to apply for the license and everything, right? And that's what I think is really unique here is that you get that report, and let's say you have 5 of those in a week, you can make a quick if you know how much money you have and you know what your target return is, you can make a quick yay nay decision on what you're going for.
Yeah, and let me show you real quick. I'm going to pull up. You can sign up for this email. I'm going to show in just a second here. This gives you an idea of just how basic, you can start with, right? So this email, you can sign up for this email. It's actually free. And you'll get this data. It doesn't show address because we want to be able to work with you to get you that. So if you reach out to us, we can get you addresses on these. But this email is free to sign up for. And you can see it talks about listing price, the rental income, and cap rate. And for those of you that don't know cap rate, it's basically a way to analyze the expenses against the revenue and the return that you get. So the higher the cap rate, the better is the premise there.
Yeah, that's really good. And we'll send this out to you guys over email too, because I think this is really cool. Like, I think there's a couple of services I signed up for before where I get these like generic listings and they almost become like noise, kind of like the Zillow alerts. And sometimes you work with real estate agents and they just set up some filters for you with no data in it. So you have to do all the work. What this is doing is curating what you want and then giving you analysis on top of it, right? So I think that's a super powerful aspect of it. I do want to open it up to questions. I think like I know we went a little long on the analysis, but I think that was good. What questions do folks have? Feel free to throw your questions in here and we'll start going through it one by one. Yes, Rebecca, you can sign up for it actually through the Baselane partner page. I just wanted to show a little bit of kind of what Baselane can do here. So yeah, if you're logged into Baselane, you can go to all partners and go to Revedy right here, and we have a link for you there. And that daily listing offering is going to be there for you as well for free. So you can click on that link and go there. I actually wanted to show, you were showing what the income would be projected, right, for the property if you buy it. I think the benefit of anybody that's already on Baselane is you can go and then actually track that income. And I'm just kind of showing some random data from a demo account here, but you can go
And
track that income and see how you're performing on a monthly basis because that is really the most
on
important
each asset, right, Saad? I mean, it's
on every
each
single
asset.
asset.
Yeah,
Yeah,
individual
yeah,
assets, which again, back to the asset conversation we had earlier, the asset is the important item here. And being able to
yes.
drill down into that level within your expenses, I think is critical. So.
Yeah. So if you're losing money, which sometimes you don't want to see that, but you might be, like that's an example of this, right? You can do it at the unit level, you can do it at the address level, you can look at your
Amazing.
entire portfolio. And this is happening in real time, so you can actually understand how much money you're making, um, not just relying on manual Excel sheets at the end of the year, especially for an Airbnb, because I think we see a lot of volume coming through in the summer months. Like we saw tons of volume of cash being deposited from like Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com into Baseline banking accounts. And you can see that, and that's really fun to watch. But like there's also months where the revenue is lower, and you want to be able to manage those expenses, like you said, and balance that out so you plan ahead. Let's see. So we've got some questions in here. Well, this is about Baseline. Will Baseline create an Apple Store? um, yeah. So while Colin's here, if you could ask a question to Colin, that would be good. We can send you something about that. We are not planning to launch an app right now, but there are conversations happening about next year, most potentially. But it is mobile web enabled, and you can download it and save it and be able to use it as a widget on your phone. So we can send you some information about that. Yes, for Faith, this was recorded, and we do have that. I guess while we're waiting for more questions, Colin, one of the things we also wanted to talk about is different types of investors and success stories. So you mentioned some of the, investors in like the Colorado area and stuff like that. You mentioned the price range of 700 to 1.5. Um, if you have about, I don't know, $100,000 worth of cash to invest, um, and we come to you and say, hey, look, I want to like invest in short-term rentals. What does that look like for somebody that doesn't have, 5, 6, 700K set aside for something like this?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, what can I get as far as a down payment? We have lending
Right.
partners that will do 80/20s. within the DSCR space. So not even within, a vacation home, an actual investment home where they use the rent to help underwrite it, which
Right.
helps, by the way, for folks that don't know that, helps you get more of that 80/20 perspective and loan.
Okay.
So, you're able to get those 80/20 loans, which allows you to invest, buy a pretty decent asset. You can buy these homes that are already furnished in many of the vacation markets that we work in, meaning that
Mm.
you don't necessarily have the upfront furniture cost. We will usually
Okay.
recommend that you put a portion, call it $10,000 aside, to help
Mm.
improve the home, even if it's furnished.
Okay.
And our design team can help through that process. Revedy Refined is what it's called, but we believe in Instagram's walls, for example.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
bright, colorful. They attract the eye when they're online on the photos on like Airbnb and VRBO, because you're trying to get that eye stop when folks are
Right.
scrolling through. And people
Okay.
actually use the Instagram walls and then advertise it for you. So yeah,
Right.
it's a fairly affordable asset. Some people get scared of that, but it's not that way if you can find the right ones. It's,
Yeah.
it's I mean, it's not, I said it right. It's all about finding the right asset.
It's all
I'm
about the
ex-
fiber.
It's all about.
So yeah, so that's helpful. And then in terms of the scope of where this can happen, so we're working with Revedy. What states are we able to invest in?
Every state. We work in every
Every
state.
state.
Yep.
Okay.
We have
That's
one of our
awesome.
family offices, as an example, has assets in California, Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, North Carolina, maybe South Carolina, and Oklahoma. I probably
Okay.
missed a couple. Um, and one of their philosophies is they like the diversification. So they like to be able to buy in multiple markets,
Okay.
because if they had an asset in Florida and the hurricane hit, they were still making money on their house in California. So
That's really smart. There's another question here from Joanna. Do you help with marketing the STR once it's acquired?
So what we do is we help you find the right manager. So we strongly encourage folks to use a manager. It's many times, unless you really understand the space, you will make just as much money using a manager and not doing a thing as you would if you self-managed it and had to do everything. So we recommend that. If not, we can help you and point you to the tools that you can use to help you self-manage. But again, our
Right.
recommendation is to use professional managers, and they are amazing. That's what they do. The right ones know how to
Right.
market your property.
Yeah, that is their job, right? That's what they're supposed to be doing,
That's,
keeping your occupancy rate up, keeping your ADR
that's
up, and
right.
then getting you
That's right.
that
It's
high rating that you're looking for.
it's very complex. I mean, the good managers are on, multiple channels doing different pricing strategies on every single channel they're working with. So you can go
Right.
look at a house on VRBO, it'll be priced different than the house on Airbnb, priced different on booking.com, and then go to their direct booking site, where they have their own, and it'll be
Right.
priced even different on there. So it's
Right.
pricing and channel, what we call channel management, is a big part of revenue.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll ask one more question because I think this comes up a lot. And I went to a STR Wealth conference in February this year where there were so many people coming in because they were losing revenue in what I would say are saturated markets and struggling to, keep their ADR up, keep their profitability up. And then, they were also investing in education, $7,000, $10,000 into courses that people were providing to teach them how to do that, right? So what are your thoughts on that, right? Like the question I had here was with increasing competition in very popular STR markets, what strategies do you recommend for investors to stay competitive and protect their returns?
It's funny because I'm going to tie it right back to the conversation we just had, which is professional managers. So if we do something, when we look at data, we're looking constantly at what we call investment grade. So that's
Okay,
professionally managed assets with good reviews that are fully available, meaning you can use them all year round, right? There's a couple other factors in there, but you get the idea. So these are
right,
true investment properties that are being used as investments. When you look at the trends within that space in almost every single market, you will
right,
see investment grade assets outperforming every quarter in a stronger amount, in a higher amount. So they're ramping
Hmm.
up like this with institutional grade, as we call it, assets. Their revenue is going up,
Right.
their ADR is going up, like those are all going up. Where if you look at non-investment grade, they'll be flat to down because of
Right.
saturation. The
Right.
saturation is coming from those non-professional assets, and
Right.
demand is increasing for professionally managed assets. I always say,
So
Sad, people
yeah.
don't want underwear hanging out of the drawer. They don't want that anymore. They used to be okay with that because they paid cheap prices, but
Right. Right.
now
Right.
they will pay to make sure that the house is in the condition they want.
So what makes it a, quote unquote investment grade asset? What are those aspects of it? I know we looked at one deal as an example just now, for example,
Yep.
but
Yep.
what are those aspects that people should be trying to make sure that that is investment grade?
Yeah, so I think there's really, I think, two things. One is where is it located? Is it located in the right spot, right?
Right.
If you've got a cabin, you might want it in the woods, right? Away from the city. But if
Right.
you've got a very nice condo, you might want it right downtown, right? So one is location, though that can change depending on where you are.
Right.
But the next is management. I mean, the management piece is so big in this space. You can literally have
Okay.
70% swings. It's why we recommend professional
Wow.
managers.
Okay.
70% swings on the same home, decorated the same way. So it isn't just about decorations. It's also how are you marketing it? How are you pricing it? How are you making sure that the guest experience is quality and it's a hospitality thing? If you're not there, does the person that you hire, are they able to give that type of experience?
Right.
Is the house
Right.
clean? There's a lot of things within that. Again, it is why we built processes around evaluating who the
That's
manager
helpful.
should be.
If that's the answer, and I have, I guess, two more questions because there's a question from the one of the customers here, then is there a minimum, you know, dollar amount that the property value should be for it to be worthwhile to have that kind of a property manager? Because I think there's I'm guessing there's a floor, right, below which it doesn't work. So that's what I'm wondering is like, what does that look like? Is that the 700K valuation that you shared earlier, for example, or is that just sort of a range?
Not necessarily. Those are the ones that we think we find, the easiest to find the good cap rates on is that 700K plus.
Okay.
But we've purchased properties for $100,000 that people are putting yurts on. So there are methods in which you can enter this space at a
Okay.
lower price point.
Okay.
It is harder to find the managers for those, and they're a little harder to make sure you get the right one. um, Even if you get one, right? Like, so it's the quality does deteriorate as you go down, but there are some
Right.
good ones. And in condo buildings, you can sometimes get assets for a low price, but they have a short-term rental manager in that complex who gets
Ah,
efficiencies of scale,
I
which
see.
allows them to actually manage that type of asset.
And Revedy and your team already knows that while you're presenting the deal, and it's already in the underwritten package. That's really
Yep,
good.
that's right.
Awesome. So we're gonna do one more question and then wrap it up. So do you do lease arbitrage? Um,
Huh.
I know we saw this the other day, so very timely question from Rebecca.
We just or have just built this out, so you can actually underwrite now within our underwriting tool, lease arbitrage units. We should be over the next, I think, month in the next month, actually presenting deals as well. So you'll actually be able to look at and see lease arbitrage deals. So
Awesome. I think that's with that. I think we're gonna wrap it up. So thank you to everybody that came and listened and asked all the questions. And special thank you to Colin for sharing all your knowledge and also a really cool underwritten deal. It looked like it was in Pennsylvania. And
you're gonna put in the
just
offer now, Sod, because we can start writing up the paperwork if you
I
like. It's a
actually
good one.
I was actually looking at it in detail because I'm in Philadelphia. I have a bunch of rentals in Philly.
Oh my goodness.
So that's why I asked you, is this a real like is this a
I'm gonna,
real deal?
I'm gonna make sure
Because
you sell all your long-term rents and buy all the short terms because we're gonna get your cash flow up.
yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah. Who wouldn't? Well, yeah, thank you so much. And I know I'm going to be working with you guys, and I'm sure lots of other people will be as well. And we'll maybe have you back again next year to also check in on how things are going. I know the platform's evolving a lot.
Love it. Thank you, Sod.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.